There are moments in life when the loudest battle is not outside you, but within. It is the quiet voice that tells you to try, and the louder world that tells you to stay small. It is the dream that stirs your heart at night, and the fear that greets you in the morning. Many people do not fail because they lack talent. They fail because they slowly learn to silence themselves. This story will show you why true courage is not about shouting above the noise, but about listening to the whisper inside. It is a story about self-belief, about discipline of the heart, about the strength it takes to honor your truth. In a quiet coastal town where the sea met the sky without hesitation, there lived a young woman named Mira who had learned to doubt her own voice. Mira had always heard things other people didn't. Not sounds, but feelings. She could sense when the ocean was restless before the waves grew loud. She could feel when a room carried tension even if everyone was smiling. And somewhere beneath all of that awareness, there was a quiet inner voice, steady, persistent, guiding. When she was younger, she trusted it completely. It told her to draw when the sky turned orange. It told her to write stories about strangers she saw at the marketplace. It told her that her imagination was not foolish, it was a gift. And so she created. Not for applause. Not for approval. But because something inside her felt alive when she did. But as she grew older, the world grew louder. Be practical, they said. Art doesn't pay the bills. Don't be too sensitive. Their words were not cruel, just cautious. But caution, repeated often enough, becomes doubt. Mira began questioning herself. Every time her inner voice whispered, "Share this," another voice replied, "What if it's not good enough?" When she imagined showing her paintings publicly, her chest tightened. When she thought about calling herself an artist, she felt almost embarrassed. She started choosing safety over expression. From the outside, her life looked stable. She worked a predictable job at a small office near the harbor. She smiled politely. She met expectations. She was dependable. Inside, something felt unfinished. At night, when the sea breeze slipped through her window, she would open her sketchbook quietly. She would draw under dim light, waves, faces, fragments of stories. And for a moment, she felt whole. Then morning would come. And she would close the book again. You may know this feeling, the quiet longing to become something more, and the equally quiet fear of being seen. Mira did not lack talent. She lacked permission, from herself. The first step was small. Almost accidental. A local cafe by the harbor announced that it would feature artwork from residents of the town. Nothing prestigious. No grand gallery. Just framed pieces on soft-colored walls where people sipped coffee and watched the tide roll in. Mira saw the notice 3 times before she allowed herself to read it fully. Her inner voice stirred. "This is safe enough," it whispered. Her hands trembled the night she selected 2 paintings, one of the shoreline at dusk, another of a woman standing alone against the wind. She nearly convinced herself not to submit them. But something deeper than fear moved her forward. A week later, her paintings were hanging beside the window. For the first time, strangers paused in front of her work. Some nodded thoughtfully. One woman traced the air near the canvas as if trying to feel the emotion inside it. A young couple took a photo. The cafe owner told her gently, "Your work feels peaceful." Peaceful. The word stayed with her. It wasn't applause. It wasn't fame. But it was enough to spark something. Mira began creating more intentionally. She woke early before work to sketch. She carried a small notebook in her bag to capture thoughts during lunch breaks. Her discipline grew quietly, not driven by pressure, but by purpose. Soon, a few paintings sold. A small article in the town newsletter mentioned her name. Friends began asking about her art. For the first time, visibility didn't feel terrifying. It felt possible. And yet, beneath her rising confidence, fear lingered like a shadow. The more people noticed her, the more exposed she felt. Each compliment lifted her, but also raised the stakes. What if the next piece wasn't as good? What if someone criticized her? What if she had mistaken encouragement for talent? Success brought warmth. But it also brought vulnerability. And vulnerability, when unfamiliar, can feel like standing at the edge of something vast, beautiful, but uncertain. Mira was rising. But she had not yet learned how to stand steady in the light. The criticism came on an ordinary afternoon. There was no storm. No warning. Mira had finally gathered the courage to share one of her paintings online, a deeply personal piece. It showed a woman standing waist-deep in the ocean, eyes closed, as if listening to something only she could hear. To Mira, it represented healing. It represented the quiet strength of listening inward. She hesitated before posting it. Her finger hovered over the screen. Her heart beat faster. Then she pressed share. At first, the response was gentle. A few likes. A few kind comments. Then, one comment appeared, sharp and careless. Overdramatic. Amateur work. 2 words. But sometimes 2 words are enough. Mira reread them again and again. Her chest tightened. The warmth she had felt from earlier praise evaporated instantly. Her mind, once filled with creativity, turned into a courtroom. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm pretending. Maybe this was a mistake. One voice from a stranger grew louder than every voice of encouragement she had received. That night, she deleted the post. The next day, she skipped her morning sketch. The day after that, she closed her notebook before drawing even a line. It wasn't anger she felt, it was embarrassment. A quiet humiliation that settled into her bones. She told herself it was logical. This is why you shouldn't expose yourself, she whispered. This is why safety matters. The dream that once felt alive now felt fragile, almost foolish. She began seeing her past success differently, as if it had been luck. As if praise had been kindness, not truth. And something inside her shifted. She stopped listening to her inner voice. Because it had led her here, to vulnerability, to judgment, to pain. You may understand this moment. When one failure feels louder than 100 victories. When courage feels naive. When the easiest way to protect your heart is to silence it. Mira did not just face criticism. She faced doubt. And doubt, when fed, grows quickly. After that afternoon, Mira made a quiet decision. She would be sensible. It sounded mature. Responsible. Even wise. She told herself that art had always been a hobby, something soft and optional. Real life, she reasoned, required stability. Predictability. A steady paycheck and lowered expectations. So she leaned further into her office work, volunteering for extra tasks, staying later than necessary, filling her calendar so completely that there was no room left for imagination. Her sketchbooks were moved from her desk drawer to the back of a closet. Not thrown away. Just, hidden. I'm just taking a break, she told herself. It's temporary. But the break stretched into weeks. Whenever the inner voice tried to rise, when the sunset turned the sky gold, or when a story idea brushed against her thoughts, she quickly drowned it out with logic. Be practical. Don't be dramatic. You tried. It didn't work. She began scrolling past art online instead of engaging with it. She avoided the cafe by the harbor. When someone casually asked if she was still painting, she smiled and changed the subject. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. Inside, something felt heavy. Creativity does not disappear quietly, it turns into restlessness. Into irritability. Into a low hum of dissatisfaction that lingers beneath daily routines. Mira noticed she was more tired than usual. Not physically, but emotionally. As if she had muted a part of herself that once gave her energy. The silence she had created did not bring peace. It brought tension. But admitting that would mean confronting the fear she was avoiding. So she clung to denial. It is strange how we can convince ourselves that shrinking is growth. That hiding is healing. That letting go of a dream is maturity. You may have done it too. Chosen safety over truth. Called it strength. But deep inside, Mira knew something important: her silence was not peace. It was self-protection disguised as discipline. And self-protection, when taken too far, becomes self-betrayal. The encounter happened on a windy evening by the sea. Mira had returned to the harbor after weeks of avoidance. She told herself she only needed fresh air. Nothing more. The waves were restless, folding into one another under a gray sky. She stood near the rocks, arms wrapped around herself, watching the horizon blur. A small voice interrupted her thoughts. "Did you make the ocean painting?" She turned. A little girl, no older than 8, stood a few steps away holding her mother's hand. The child's eyes were bright with recognition. "I saw it at the cafe," the girl continued. "The lady in the water. She looked brave." Mira blinked. Brave? The girl nodded firmly. Yes. Like she wasn't scared of the waves. Something shifted inside Mira, something fragile, almost forgotten. "I liked it," the child said softly. "It made me feel calm. My mom said it felt peaceful." Peaceful. The same word again. Mira knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "What if someone says it's not good?" she asked without thinking. The girl shrugged in the honest way only children can. "Then maybe they don't hear what it's saying." The simplicity of it settled deep. Maybe they don't hear what it's saying. The child smiled and ran back toward her mother, leaving Mira alone with the sea and her thoughts. The waves kept moving. Not louder. Not softer. Just steady. Mira realized something profound in that moment: her art had never been about pleasing everyone. It had been about expressing something true. And truth does not require universal approval. For weeks, she had allowed one careless voice to overpower her own. But courage, she understood now, is not the absence of criticism. It is the decision to speak anyway. And perhaps her inner voice had not been wrong. Perhaps she had simply stopped listening. That night, Mira opened her closet. The sketchbooks were exactly where she had left them, stacked neatly, waiting without accusation. She ran her fingers over the covers as if greeting old friends she had neglected. For a moment, fear returned. What if you feel that sting again? What if you're not strong enough? But beneath the fear was something steadier. Courage is rarely loud. It does not roar. It whispers, "Try again." She did not announce her return to art. She did not post online. She did not tell anyone. She simply sat at her desk, opened a blank page, and began with a single line. The line was imperfect. So she drew another. This time, she did not create to impress. She created to listen. To understand what her inner voice was trying to say after weeks of silence. She set a simple discipline for herself: 30 quiet minutes each evening. No expectations. No audience. Just presence. Some nights, nothing remarkable appeared on the page. Other nights, emotion flowed through her like the tide. But slowly, she began to trust herself again. Not because everyone approved, but because she showed up. Healing, she realized, was not about erasing criticism. It was about rebuilding self-belief through consistent action. She returned to the cafe one afternoon, not to check for validation, but to sit with a notebook and sketch the light as it filtered through the window. The fear of being seen was still there, but it no longer controlled her. With each small act of courage, her strength deepened. She understood now that self-belief is not a feeling you wait for. It is a muscle you train. A quiet transformation began, not dramatic, not immediate, but real. She was no longer silencing her inner voice. She was learning to stand beside it. And that, in itself, was a rebirth. The transformation did not arrive with applause. It arrived with steadiness. Weeks of quiet discipline turned into months of gentle growth. Mira's evenings became sacred, a time where the world softened and her inner voice spoke clearly again. She no longer created from fear of judgment, nor from hunger for praise. She created because it felt aligned with her purpose. And alignment brings peace. One afternoon, she decided to share a new painting online. This time, her hands were calm. Not because criticism could not hurt her, but because it no longer defined her. She understood something now: courage is not about controlling outcomes. It is about honoring truth. The responses came again. Some warm. Some indifferent. One mildly critical. But this time, the criticism did not echo endlessly in her mind. It passed through. Because her self-belief was no longer built on external voices. It was built on consistent action. On the quiet discipline of showing up. On the strength of letting go of perfection. Opportunities slowly expanded. A small gallery invited her to display her work. A local school asked her to conduct a workshop for children. She said yes, not because she needed validation, but because she wanted to give back the encouragement she once needed. Standing before a group of young students, she saw reflections of her younger self, hesitant, hopeful, uncertain. Your voice matters, she told them gently. Even when it shakes. And she meant it. The sea outside her town continued its rhythm, rising and falling without apology. Mira understood now that her journey was not about avoiding waves. It was about learning to stand in them. She had not become fearless. She had become faithful to herself. And in that faith, she found something deeper than success. She found freedom. There is a quiet tragedy in this world. So many people silence the very voice that was meant to guide them. They call it maturity. They call it practicality. They call it discipline. But sometimes, what they are really doing is abandoning their own truth. Mira's journey reminds us of something simple and powerful. 1. Your inner voice is not foolish, it is intuitive. 2. Failure is feedback, not a verdict on your worth. 3. Courage is not loud, it is the decision to try again. 4. Self-belief grows through discipline, not applause. 5. Letting go of validation creates space for peace. 6. Criticism loses power when your purpose is clear. 7. Healing begins the moment you stop betraying yourself. 8. Transformation happens when you choose authenticity over approval. You may be standing at the edge of your own ocean right now. You may feel the pull of something creative, meaningful, purposeful, and at the same time, the weight of doubt pressing you back. You may have silenced your voice to avoid judgment. You may have called your fear logic. But the voice inside you has not disappeared. It is waiting. Waiting for you to trust it again. Waiting for you to act with courage. Waiting for you to take one small step toward who you are meant to become. Do not silence it. The world is already loud enough. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs the courage to believe in themselves. And remember, your voice matters. Even when it trembles. Especially when it trembles.